In this lesson, I want to go over how you can use the Wavetable editor to import audio samples. Now, I first showed you the first way we can import audio samples is taking something like this Juno bass one-shot and just dragging it on top of the oscillator, and you have these different import options, these FFT options. And you can do it that way. And this is usually good enough. You can just play around with which one works the best. Now, if I go into the Wavetable editor, same thing will happen. If I click on the sound and drag it in, then we have some import options. So we've got import constant frame size. Now, this is what will happen here is that it will have a constant frame size for each of the different slices. And this is helpful if you know the pitch of your sample because it says it's going to take a pitch average. And I know that this is a D. If I import this in, it's going to say split at 601 samples, note D1 in 0 cents. So that is saying that this is a D, and that is pretty accurate. It was able to adjust and create all of these different frames based upon this note being a D note. Now, as I'm playing this bass one shot, it sounds a bit buzzy to me. So what I might do is try one of the other import options. And I'm going to go into this formula parser, hit 0 to 0 out the formula. And I might try one of these other import options. Now you can try the import normal dynamic pitch 0 snap. Now with the import constant frame size, it's going to have the same frame size for the entire audio file. So it's going to take a specific capture length of time and apply that to every little slice. But in these dynamic ones, it's going to adjust the amount of information that it is capturing for each frame because it's assuming that the pitch is changing. Like it's not assuming that the pitch is going to be the same all the way throughout the whole note. So this is the best for like a simple sound that has a constant pitch. This one is for maybe a bit more of like a complex sound, but still relatively simple. And then this one is going to be for more complex sounds. And then these down here will import like the spectral content of the sound. So you just have to like really experiment with these options. I might try this one and see how this sounds. And it does sound a bit less buzzy to me, so I might use something like that. Now I can try one of these FFT options. And it doesn't even sound like the original audio sample. What this FFT is doing is analyzing kind of like the harmonics of that bass sample that I imported and then trying to create like a unique wavetable out of it. So these are just kind of like fun things to experiment, importing like various sounds that if you want something a bit more abstract. Let me initialize this. If I don't want to use one of these options, maybe I want to get a bit more complicated, then I can go into this enter formula and do a manual import. And let's say I know the note of my sample is D, and this is important because I need to know how many slices, how big the slices are going to be, and it knows how big the slices are going to be based upon the pitch of a sample. Because let's say I do D1, which I already know that it's a D1, then it's going to split it at 601 samples. If I thought it was like D2, it'll split it at 300 samples. So you can kind of see the pattern here is that the higher the note, the smaller the amount of samples. So let's say it's D4, 75 samples. So I know it's D1, so it's going to split it at 601 samples. And if I just import this in, now it says split at 601 samples D1. And now it is going to split this into using 601 samples. And so we've got 125 different little frames here. And now what you want to look for is you want this wavetable to relatively stay in the frame. If you import in an audio sample and you start to see this wavetable start to drift off to the left or the right, like you can see a little bit of drifting here, but if it starts to drift off a lot, see this one relatively stays in the same space. So I know that this was, I chose the right note. But let's say if I accidentally did something like, so split at 601, zero that out. Let's say I accidentally split it at 590 samples, and then I imported this. And now let's just check out the wavetable and see what is happening. So now you can see that it's like slowly drifting to the right. And that is going to be phase. So we have the this phasing happening. And if you have phasing happening, then if I'm like scrolling through these wavetables, then we're going to have some of the harmonic content being canceled out. And we don't really necessarily want that. So we want to try to maintain the phase. And if I do have this happening, if it's drifting to the right, then increase your samples, you're splitting it out. If you have it drifting to the left, then decrease these samples. So let's go ahead and see what happens if I do 610 and I drag this in. Now let's see what is happening. As I go through this, we can see that it is now starting to drift to the left, and we'll then choose 601, which is what we wanted it at. And let's scroll through the samples, and we can see that now we have this wavetable relatively staying in frame. So if you are doing any kind of like manual import where you don't want to use one of those automatic options of just doing one of these three imports and you want some more control over it, then you can just try that option where you enter in like the note or the samples that you want these frames to be split at. So let me go ahead and initialize this. I wanted to just drag in this base one shot and use this import mode because I felt like that one worked the best. Now you can see I've got a bit of a blank space here. So you might also want to prep your samples before you import them into Serum, because there's a bit of space there. There's a bit of space at the end as well. And what you could do to clear the space at the end is I could select one of these little frames and then do remove select to end. And then it's going to remove that excess information. And this one, unfortunately, is, if I removed this frame though, it would remove all of this stuff. So what I might want to do is like go into my audio sample and maybe just get rid of that beginning information. And then I might as well just clear out the end as well. So let's go ahead and just clear the rest of this. And we'll go ahead and do Command J to consolidate that. And then we'll do an import again. Import this into Serum again. So that's pretty good sounding to me. And if I wanted to do something, there's still a bit of buzziness. I could try doing some morphing to get rid of that buzziness. I could use maybe the spectral morph, and this will maybe smooth out the wavetables a bit. And now I don't really hear very much buzziness. I can go to my LFO1, adjust it like that, put it on envelope, put my rate at 1/4, have it cycle through the wavetable position. And now it sounds pretty close to the original sample. Here's the original sample. And then here is Serum. Still a bit of buzziness and noise on there, but I think that there is actually some noise on the original sample as well, because it's probably modeling a vintage Juno. But this is a pretty cool sound that I could have now, like a bass pluck. And I can remove this and just maybe use one of my own wavetable positions like that. And then I could even just have this imported. I have all those options where you can test out what happens if I process it or morph it. Like if I wanted to, let's remove the fundamental. That is removing that low end. We can nudge all phases for the fundamental to 50%. Let's see if this changes anything. I could try something like crossfading the edges. Let's do crossfading the edges. Maybe to get some smoothing going on between those wavetable positions, I could do my LFO like this and maybe create some cool bass sounds. Like a wobble or something. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can do once you have that imported. You can play around with those wavetables, and if you want to save it as a wavetable, you can export the file or exit out of here and then hit this save button, and then you can go into where you have all of your other wavetables and save it into the user folder. And as you can see, this is the user folder. These are other wavetables that I have imported or made, so not that many. I usually just try to stick to the ones that come with Serum. So that is everything that I wanted to cover about the Wavetable editor. I will see you in the next lesson.